The reason your self-improvement journey is so difficult right now isn't because you're not trying hard enough. It isn't because of organization, although that could be a part of it. It isn't because of your family or your friends. It's simply because you're doing too many high dopamine bad habits right now. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Dopamine, if you don't know, is what's called a neurotransmitter. It's a hormone in the body, and it's basically responsible for motivation. And as an extension of motivation, it's responsible for your mood, your focus, essentially what you're drawn to doing. So when you feel like eating junk food or scrolling, for example, that's because there's a lot of dopamine associated with those activities. I'm not going to go very, very in depth into exactly how dopamine is produced and how it works evolutionarily. You're just going to have to trust me on that one. But effectively, here's what's happening in your days. You wake up, and for the majority of you, immediately you grab your phone, you start scrolling. Why do you do that? Dopamine. And then as soon as you're done that, instead of going to the gym or doing anything productive like you've actually planned, you go and do another bad habit. Maybe you scroll even more, maybe you go and have an unhealthy breakfast, maybe you watch Netflix or something like that. All of that is because of dopamine. And that's actually doing a few different things. You might think, oh yeah, of course, I'm scrolling, it's bad for my focus, it's wasting time. True, it is doing all of those things. But it's also doing something else, which is it's making all of the good habits even harder to do. And the reason for that is because of essentially human programming. Your body, you're attracted to high dopamine habits. The more dopamine you can sense that something is going to give you, it's kind of, I'm trying to explain it in a way that is simple and not complicated, but it's kind of hard to do without going into the sciencey part of it. Effectively, when you do a bunch of high dopamine habits, your brain does a thing called neuroadaptation. And stick with me, I know you heard the word neuroadaptation, you want to click off the video and go watch something more simpler. Just hear me out. Your brain does a thing called neuroadaptation, which is basically when you're continually exposed to this high dopamine thing, your neurons sort of rewire so that that thing doesn't give you as much dopamine anymore. You've probably heard that before in extreme cases with addicts where they have to take more and more of a drug every time to get the same hit. And that actually applies to other things as well. It actually applies to things like scrolling on social media, even like simple things like that. And what happens with that, and it's definitely happening to you because check your screen time. You can see how much you're spending on these apps every single day. What's actually happening to you when you do that is those things are starting to release less and less dopamine as you do them. And you might think, well, that's a good thing. That means I'm less motivated to do it. No, because everything else is also being pushed down. So not only are you in a lower dopamine state now because you've been continually doing these bad habits and your focus is worse, your overall mood is worse because you've been continually doing these dopamine spiking habits and it's pushed down your baseline dopamine. But it also pushes down everything else. When you're the person who is scrolling for hours a day, watching Netflix for hours a day, playing video games for hours a day, eating unhealthy food, do you think it's easier or harder to exercise, to go to the gym, to read, to sleep on time? It's not just more difficult because you're addicted to all of these bad things. It's also more difficult because you've lowered your baseline dopamine. That's the problem here. The more high dopamine spiking habits you do, the more used to them effectively you become. And so when you move off them onto the old things, the things you actually should be doing to improve your life and insert whatever task, you probably clicked on this video and immediately thought of something that you're trying to do more that's difficult. It's actually harder to do that now because you're so used to the other things that this normal good thing is difficult. It's so low down the pecking order that you don't even feel like doing it anymore. So what is the solution? Well, the solution is, you're not going to like the solution, but future you will like the solution because you'll understand eventually that this is really the only thing you can do. And that's to start cutting out the high dopamine habits that are bad for you. I want you to think for a second about, think of the habit that you do the most, that you tell yourself that is good for you, even though you sort of know that it isn't. It could be any of the things we've already mentioned in this video, or it could be something else. I want you to imagine what the best version of you would be doing right now. Would the best possible version of you, the most successful version of you, be doing this habit it could just be watching Netflix for a few hours a day instead of actually working on the goals you set yourself, and you watch the goals you set yourself each day, and you just know you're not any closer to them because you're doing these other bad things instead. Would the best version of you do that habit? If the answer is no, then you shouldn't be doing it, and that's the only answer you need. That's what I asked myself. For the last few days, I can admit this, I've got a bit distracted on Netflix. I've watched a few shows that I don't normally watch, and it was kind of fun at the start, and then I realized my sleep has gotten worse. It's taken away time that I could be putting into, recording more YouTube videos, and I've decided I'm not going to do it anymore because it wasn't actually making me happy. And the question I asked myself was, what would the best possible version of me do? Would the best possible version of me be watching Netflix right now instead of either going to bed or working on something? And the answer is no, of course not. The best version of me wouldn't be doing that, and I'm going to try and be more like the best version of me, so I'm going to get rid of that thing. That's basically the mentality you have to adopt. And then as soon as you do that and you take action, you get rid of that thing, you'll slowly find the harder, lower dopamine habits that are actually good for you and that you actually need to be doing to be a happy person are now easier to do effectively, because there's no longer these extremely high dopamine apps or anything like that that's literally been designed to be addictive and dopamine spiking. Because you no longer have those things, your brain goes through neuroadaptation again, which it's doing constantly every second of every day. And it's rewiring itself to bring those low dopamine habits back up again, to raise your baseline dopamine and to effectively make it easier for you to do those things. And then another interesting thing happens, and I'll end the video on this. But at the start of this video, we talked about how doing the high dopamine bad habits pushes your baseline dopamine down. And then the more and more you do them, the more that continues. What do you think happens when you get rid of those habits and you start actually building a habit of doing the good habits? Maybe you start going to the gym 3 times a week and you keep that up for a few months. What do you think happens to that habit? Do you think it gets harder or easier to do? It gets easier. The more you do a habit, the easier it gets, because your body gets used to it, and especially if it's a good habit. Because imagine you're doing, gym is a good example because I just brought it up. You won't see the results immediately, but after a few months of keeping that up, you will see the results of doing it. And you'll like seeing the results of doing it. And your brain is going to rewire to associate this habit with this result that you like. And it's going to be way, way easier to do. That's the power of compounding momentum. The more you do these good habits, the more your brain actually starts to realize. I know you understand that doing these things is good for you, but you sort of have to experience it to fully understand it. And your brain will actually understand how valuable this thing is to you, and it will make it easier. It will make it a higher dopamine task, which is why for me, someone who's been in the gym for 3.5 years, it's no longer difficult for me to do. I had a funny conversation with my dad last week because I was planning to take a rest day and I didn't end up taking one. I went to the gym it happened I think 4 or 5 days in a row, and I ended up at the end of the day going to the gym anyway. And it was kind of funny because I'd tell him I was taking a rest day and then he'd see me leaving at the end of the night in gym clothes. It'd be like, most people struggle to go to the gym and I'm like struggling to plan a rest day. But that really is how it goes. So guys, that is the video. Hit the subscribe button, ebook in the description, and have a good one.